On Friday the 13th of September 1963, 2 weeks before the first attempt at recording Doctor Who's debut episode in Limegrove Studio D, that same studio was booked for an experimental technical session. All we know of this is from a memo requesting the attendance of 2 cameramen, a vision mixer and a stagehand, along with a police or phone box prop and a little stock scenery. It's therefore assumed the purpose of the session was to test ways of showing the TARDIS appearing and disappearing, using the electronic cameras and video recording equipment of Studio D. But it's not known what techniques were tried, and by all accounts the session was cut short, perhaps proving inconclusive. So how did they depict the TARDIS taking off and landing in the early years of the series and beyond? The most established technique, and that used for the first time the TARDIS is seen dematerialising, was to film the required before and after shots and mix between them with a simple dissolve. This was done using an optical printer, a device that had been around in one form or another since the 1920s. 2 pieces of film could be duplicated onto a third strip, and through the use of lighting, lenses and mirrors, their images combined so that one slowly changed into the other. If the only difference was the presence of one object, say a police box, this would seem to fade away while the background remained. Filming the full-sized TARDIS prop tended to be done when the setting of its arrival needed the extra space afforded by a film stage, such as the woodland of Palestine in The Crusade, or the snowy wastes of Antarctica in The 10th Planet. The box could also be taken on location, of course. This was first done for its arrival in 22nd century London at the start of the Dalek invasion of Earth. Such scenes also had to be filmed, as until the 1970s, electronic cameras were far too bulky to use outdoors. Director Michael Ferguson chose an unusual angle for the TARDIS's return to London in the War Machines, filming from the top of the Centrepoint building, with the police box erected in nearby Bedford Square. One of its most stylish arrivals was in the War Games. Director David Maloney shot the prop's reflection in a muddy puddle in no man's land, actually a rubbish tip outside Brighton. Its subsequent departure was an equally elegant low-angle shot. Location filming became more prevalent in the 1970s, and filmed materialisation shots were common. The final instance was for Revelation of the Daleks in 1985. Filming was also used for models. The first miniature police box was glimpsed in Marco Polo, although not seen materialising. This effect was debuted in the following serial, The Keys of Mariners, using a tiny 2-inch model. The same footage was played in reverse for its departure in episode 6. This model TARDIS was used again in Planet of Giants, and last seen in the closing moments of The Chase. In between, director Christopher Barry had commissioned a new miniature for the Romans. This was around 3 feet tall and thus much more detailed. It would be used throughout the 1960s, being filmed on both model sets and on location, in preference to transporting the full-size prop, such as in The Underwater Menace, and The Dominators. This model TARDIS last appeared in episode 4 of Planet of Evil. More miniatures were used during Doctor Who's original run, including the TV movie, but in the revived series they were replaced by CGI models. If the TARDIS's appearance had to be achieved in the television studio, because pre-filming was unsuitable or unavailable, a technique commonly used in Doctor Who's early days was to mix between the shots of 2 cameras, one aimed at the police box prop, the other at a photograph of the empty set. This is how the ship's departure at the end of The Daleks was achieved. A shot of the TARDIS on the Skaro jungle set was taken as part of the episode's main recording. The vision mixer then switched to a second camera's view of a photo of the empty set, taken earlier in the day during camera rehearsals, printed large and directed on an easel. As you can see, some effort was made to line up a prominent branch to help sell the illusion the police box was vanishing. The reverse could be done, mixing from a photo to the TARDIS on set, as for its arrival in the Reign of Terror, less well aligned this time. Or two photos of a set, one with and one without the police box, could be used as in The Rescue. Here the roof lamp was cut out and a light shone behind to make it flash. The last time this technique was used was in The Seeds of Death episode 6. After the cast was shot entering the police box prop, the image was mixed to a photo of the empty set. Sadly, not a very precise match for the live set image. An alternative technique also requiring the vision mixer was video inlay. Here, two camera shots were combined using a mask. This was prepared by the vision mixer from pieces of black card arranged on a light box, above which a camera was suspended. This was first used for the TARDIS dematerializing at the end of the Dalek invasion of Earth. A simple mask was made by placing two pieces of black card on either side of the light box to produce a black-white-black tricolor. Where the inlay camera sees black, the image from the camera shooting Susan on the bridge set is recorded to tape. Where the inlay camera sees white, the image from a camera trained on a photo of the TARDIS is inserted. The shape of the mask could be more complex to cut around the image being inlaid. For example, in the Web Planet episode 1, when the TARDIS tries to take off, a shot of the police box is inlaid into a view of the Vortis set so it can be faded in and out. The vision mixer tried to make a mask in the shape of the prop, although the restoration for DVD reveals this does not quite match. Film dissolves, video mixes using photos, and video inlay were the three techniques used for TARDIS materializations throughout the black and white era of Doctor Who. It wasn't until the introduction of more advanced electronic cameras in the 1970s, also shooting in colour, that new methods became available. The most common and well-known was referred to as roll back and mix. At its simplest, the first half of a scene, say an empty set where the TARDIS is due to materialise, was recorded onto videotape. This was then rewound while the police box prop was moved into position. Ideally, it was ensured the camera didn't move at all during this break in recording. The tape was then played back and duplicated onto the main episode recording tape. At the appropriate point, the vision mixer would switch the input from this to the live camera shot of the TARDIS, making it look on the recording as though the box was appearing from nowhere. This could be done live during the episode recording, but was more usually achieved in an editing session. The two before and after tapes would be played back and mixed between while recording to a third. The first TARDIS shot using this technique was the Doctor testing the console in episode 5 of Inferno. It was first used to show the police box dematerialising at the end of the Curse of Peladon, although this also incorporates other camera trickery, so we'll come back to that. The first straightforward TARDIS takeoff and landing using rollback and mix was not until The Mutants episode 1, although when it both leaves the Doctor's unit lab and arrives on Skybase, the cameras shift slightly, making the background blur, a sadly common occurrence. Rollback and mix was the main technique used throughout the 1970s and 1980s through to Survival, but it could be combined with other effects to produce something more interesting than a simple crossfade. Usually the TARDIS is seen fading in or out alone, to avoid anything else in shot moving between the two takes. Look to the Time Monster episode 5 for examples of why having actors trying to stand perfectly still between takes is not a good idea. In The Curse of Peladon episode 4, however, director Lenny Mayne uses a split screen effect so the alien delegates can be seen moving while the TARDIS departs. The Doctor and Jo were recorded entering the room and boarding the TARDIS. The police box was removed and the delegates were then recorded entering the empty set and reacting to something they couldn't really see. In editing, the first scene was replayed, and once Jon Pertwee had entered the TARDIS, the right side of the picture was overlaid with the second recording. Note how the image brightens and the torches blur as the new shot is faded in. The join is a soft white just to the right of the TARDIS, visible where the tone of the floor is slightly different. Islia points, and then the left-hand side of the image is faded out to reveal the empty set. You can see the shadow of Islia's outstretched arm disappear across the join, then reappear as the TARDIS vanishes. Director Barry Letts uses the same technique in Planet of the Spiders to allow movement on screen while the TARDIS materialises. An example towards the end of episode 5 is noteworthy, as the split is not a straight vertical line down the centre of the screen as usual. Instead, the joint angles above the TARDIS roof so actors can be positioned beyond. In episode 6, Letts applied multiple rollbacks so the Doctor could appear on the left, cross to the TARDIS on the right, which then vanished as Lupton's men entered the cellar from the left. Note how Barnes stops short of the split-screen join down the centre of the picture. In The Deadly Assassin, the TARDIS's transduction to the museum was scripted as a straightforward rollback and mix effect, but director David Maloney wanted to indicate a different form of travel from the ship's usual dematerialisation. He used a pattern generator, as featured in The Hand of Fear for King Rokon's screens, to produce shifting blocks in 3 colours. These could then be used as CSO keys for 3 different shots of the police box to be combined, the view as it finally appears, and 2 close-up shots of the windows. New technology allowed director Lovett Bickford to go one step further in the Leisure Hive. This time, rollback and mix and split screen were combined with Quantel's digital zoom ability to produce a shot of the TARDIS materialising where it appears as though the camera is moving, an effect not achievable for real before computer-controlled camera motion. The TARDIS's arrival on Argolis was shot with 2 takes combined using a split-screen effect, as seen before. This allowed the police box to fade in front of Pangol, while actors appeared on the right of the picture. Note part of the TARDIS sign can be seen sticking out beyond the join before the rest of it materialises. A genuine camera move comes when it pans down the TARDIS as the Doctor emerges. The combined shot was loaded into the Quantel DPE 5000 and digitised. It started zoomed into the top left corner, then pulled back to full frame. This was timed to finish just as the downward pan began, giving the impression of one fluid pull back and down camera movement. Surprisingly, given 1970s producer Barry Letts' fondness for the technique, CSO was rarely used to make the TARDIS appear or disappear. Director Michael Ferguson used it in The Claws of Axos, superimposing a shot of the 3-foot model police box onto scenes in the cyclotron laboratory. Although the full-size prop was already present on the set, it was presumably quicker to achieve the effect with the miniature. Letts himself used plenty of CSO in Planet of the Spiders, including for shots of the TARDIS arriving on Metabilis 3. The prop was recorded against a yellow background, which was replaced by a model or photo representing the location. Rather than roll back and mix, this was likely done by simply mixing from the camera recording the background view to the one shooting the TARDIS, but with the same background shot inserted via CSO, so that doesn't change. When the TARDIS developed the ability to hover in Season 18, CSO was again used to insert a model police box into the skies above the Tharil's domain in Warrior's Gate, above Logopolis in Logopolis,
Logopolis?
Yes.
and above Heathrow Airport in Time Flight. By the time the series returned in 2005, digital effects were commonplace, and making the TARDIS appear and disappear was easy. Even so, like rollback and mix, it still requires before and after shots to be taken with and without the police box. But computer-controlled camera movements and digital retouching mean keeping the background steady is much easier. Discover lots more about the TARDIS and its travels in the TARDIS Chronicles, Volume 1 available now from Wonderful Books.